Chosen one, I need you to close the door. Not as a dramatic opener, I mean it literally. If there is a door near you right now, close it. If there are other people in the same space, step away or put in your headphones and create some distance between yourself and everything outside. If your attention is divided between this and something else right now, let the other thing wait. Come fully into this space, just this, just you, just now. Before anything else, take one real breath. Not the kind you take to brace yourself before something difficult, the kind that happens when you have finally arrived somewhere that actually belongs to you. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw go soft. Let the noise outside this closed room stay exactly where it is. Because what I am about to share with you did not land in your life today by accident. You did not stumble onto this. Out of everything pulling at your attention in this particular season, a force that sees beyond what is visible to the human eye, a divine intelligence that knows your name and knows your season, and knows the weight you have been carrying in quiet for longer than the people around you realize, placed this in front of you today. Not last month, not next year. Today, in this exact chapter of your story. And the timing of that matters more than I can explain in a single sentence. Before I go into what I actually came here to say, let me tell you what is waiting for you if you stay with me until the very end of this. You are going to receive the name for what you carry, the one you have been reaching toward for years, without quite landing on it. You are going to understand why you were wired the way you are, and why your life has moved along a path that has never quite looked like anyone else's, in ways that have sometimes confused even you. You are going to hear the science behind your sensitivity, and that science is going to change how you see everything I am about to name. And you are going to know what the next concrete step actually looks like. Not a vague direction, a real step. Stay with me for all of it. One thing before we begin. Everything I share in the next several minutes is completely free. All of it. But if at any point something in you says there is more you specifically need, something more personal to where you are right now, you will find it in the description below and in the pinned comment. Only follow that pull if your spirit confirms it. For now, just be here with me. Now, let me say something I want to say without any softening around it. You did not choose the sensitivity. You did not choose the way you wake in the middle of the night with something pressing on your chest that you cannot identify. You did not choose the knowing that arrives inside you before the explanation does. You did not choose to be the person who walks into a room and immediately feels the weight of what happened there before anyone opens their mouth. These things chose you. And for a long time, perhaps for most of your life, carrying them has felt far more like a burden than anything resembling a gift. I know that, and I am not going to rush past it to get to the encouraging part. What you have been carrying is real. The cost of it is real. I want to sit with that for a moment before we go anywhere. What I want to do right now is name 5 things that are already happening in your life. 5 things you may have been explaining away as overthinking or anxiety, or just the particular way you happen to be built. Because when you hear them named correctly, something shifts inside you. Not a manufactured emotional response, an actual recognition, the kind that lands in the bones and stays there. The first one is the sleep. You wake at a specific hour, not every single night, but often enough that you have started to register the pattern without meaning to. Sometimes it is 3 in the morning. Sometimes it is just before dawn, when the world outside is completely still. And when you wake, you are not groggy and disoriented the way most people are when their sleep is disturbed. You are alert, fully present, like something inside you has switched on without asking permission. Your mind begins moving immediately, and there is something in the room with you, a weight or a presence you cannot put language to. And so you have learned over the years to simply lie in it and wait, because fighting it accomplishes nothing at all. That is not insomnia. That is not your nervous system misfiring. Your spirit is awake because something in the unseen is active. The chosen one has always received their deepest communications in the still hours. This is ancient. You have simply been told, by a world that can only measure what fits inside its instruments, that something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. The second one is the fatigue that does not respond to rest. You know the difference between ordinary tiredness and this. Ordinary tiredness lifts after sleep, after a quiet weekend, after a few days with no obligations. This one lives deeper, in the bones themselves, not in the muscles. You can sleep 8 full hours and find it waiting for you in the morning, unchanged. You can rest for an entire day, and it is still there underneath everything else, quiet and persistent and heavy. And it is not depression, though well-meaning people will sometimes offer that word. Depression has its own texture, its own particular way of pressing down. This is something that word does not accurately cover. Your body is processing weight that the people around you deflect without knowing they are doing it. You walk into a space and you absorb what was already present there before you arrived. You carry the emotional residue of conversations, of tensions, of people you love, without ever being asked to take that on. That is not weakness. That is the cost of how you were built. And it is a real cost. I am not going to minimize it. The third one is the tears that arrive without a reason you can explain. You are in the middle of something completely ordinary, and something opens. Not sadness, in the way the word is usually used. Not grief that you can trace to a specific source. Something older and deeper than either of those words contains. Something that moves through you rather than sitting still inside you. And the tears come, and you let them, because you have learned by now that resisting them is like pushing against water. And when they pass, there is something like clarity in the air, as if something moved through you rather than accumulated inside you. What you have been calling being too emotional, researchers studying brainwave activity and perception have begun calling something closer to high-frequency sensitivity. You feel the frequency of spaces, of people, of seasons that are beginning to change before they visibly change. That is not a flaw in how you are built. That is a function, a very specific one. Now I want to name 2 more, and these are the ones people are quickest to dismiss. Stay with me on both of them. The fourth one is the numbers. You glance at the time, and it reads 11:11. You notice 3:33. Somewhere, you were not even looking for it. The same sequence appears across completely unrelated contexts, across different parts of your day, in places with no logical connection to one another. And you have tried to call it coincidence, but it keeps arriving in moments when you were not searching for it, which is the part that cannot be so easily explained. Your awareness has been calibrated to notice signal inside noise at a resolution that most people simply are not running at. The chosen one notices what others scan past without pausing. That is not projection. That is by design. The fifth one is the knowing that arrives before the explanation does. You have walked into a conversation already knowing how it would unfold. You have thought of someone in the minutes just before they reached out. You have felt the shift in something before a single word was spoken to confirm what you already knew was happening. And you have spent years cycling between trusting that knowing and doubting it, because the people around you do not seem to experience the world this way. And the quiet isolation of being that different has been its own specific weight for a long time. In the ancient language of those who first tried to put this into words, there is one specific term for what you carry. In Hebrew, the word is bakar. And it does not mean selected based on a performance. It does not mean chosen because you competed and came out ahead. Bacha means chosen with foreknowledge, chosen before the evidence of your worthiness existed, chosen before the sensitivity was visible to anyone else, before the knowing arrived consistently enough for you to begin trusting it yourself. Before any of it, you were already seen, you were already set apart. And I hear the Spirit saying this over you right now. I did not wire you this way by accident. I wired you this way on purpose. If any of those 5 things landed in you just now, type 777 inches, the comments below. Not for any algorithm, as your own quiet acknowledgement, your yes. Now, these 5 signs are real, every single one of them, but they are not the revelation. They are only the doorway. And the doorway opens into something I want to walk through with you right now. Because here is what nobody told you about the people who carry this kind of design. They are never prepared in public. Never. The formation that matters most, the deepest part of who they are becoming, always happens in private. In the season that looks like nothing from the outside. In the wilderness, in the closed room, with no audience. Think about Moses in the specific ordinary moment just before everything changed. He was not standing in front of anyone trying to prove his calling was real. He was not in a position of influence building the connections that might eventually launch him somewhere significant. He was alone, in the wilderness, doing ordinary work, in ordinary terrain, completely invisible to everyone who might have mattered, with no indication at all that anything significant was approaching. And that is the exact moment the burning bush appeared. The most important encounter of his entire life did not happen during a performance. It happened during invisibility, during the quiet, unwitnessed ordinary. The fire showed up when there was no audience to impress. That pattern is not coincidence. That is how the formation of a chosen one works. And then there is Esther, who gives us the other dimension of this same truth. The words that became the defining sentence of her entire calling, for such a time as this, were not words she spoke about herself. They were spoken about her by someone who could see further than she could in that season. Someone looked at her life, at everything that had been refined and shaped and prepared in private, and recognized something she had not yet fully recognized in herself. The chosen one is often the last person in the room to understand what they were chosen for. Someone else sees it first. And then, slowly, carefully, you begin to see it too. But before you can see it, something has to be cleared away. The world handed you a story about yourself across all those years of formation. It told you the sensitivity was a liability to manage, that the knowing was unreliable and should not be trusted, that the depth at which you processed everything was a problem rather than a capacity, that the waking at 3 in the morning was a disorder rather than a signal. And piece by piece, across years, you adjusted yourself around that story. You learned to turn down the volume on things that were never meant to be turned down. You learned to perform a version of ordinary because being what you actually are felt too exposed. But here is what the formation was doing on the inside, the entire time. It was not punishing you. It was clearing away the identity that was never really yours to begin with. The version of you that required external validation to feel real. The version that apologized for its sensitivity. The version that had decided the only safe way to exist was to make yourself smaller and quieter and easier for other people to be around. That version needed to dissolve so that what was underneath it could finally breathe. What felt like loneliness was not loneliness, it was assignment. What felt like being forgotten was not oversight. It was protection from everything that would have derailed what was being carefully built inside you. What felt like years of silence was not absence. It was preparation for a voice that could only come from the kind of quiet that long silence creates. What felt like the wrong season was never the wrong season. It was the only season that could have produced the version of you that what comes next actually requires. If that landed somewhere real in you just now, let your like be your agreement. Gently press it. Let this reach someone today who needs to hear the same thing. Let me pause here for a moment. You have been in this closed room for close to 12 minutes now. I want you to notice something. Notice the weight of your shoulders, the rhythm of your breathing, whether something in the way you are holding yourself has shifted since you first pressed play. Before I continue into what comes next, just breathe. One breath that belongs entirely to this moment and nothing else. Not a breath to brace yourself. Not a breath you are performing. just a real breath. Good. What comes next changes the entire frame of everything I have just told you. Not adds to it, changes the frame of it entirely. There is something I need to share with you about the frequency of your brain, not as a metaphor but as a measurable and documented reality, and it recontextualizes every single sign I just named. Once you hear it, the sensitivity and the knowing and the waking in the still hours will never feel the same way again. But before I go there, one brief mention. There is an audio track called The Genius Song. It was built to work directly with the frequency I am about to describe in a way that is simple and daily and requires nothing other than 7 minutes and a pair of headphones. I am going to come back to this in much more detail, but if something in what you have heard today is already drawing you toward it, the link is in the description and the pinned comment below, only if you feel led. For now, let me finish what I came to tell you, because the teaching is what makes everything else make sense. What you have been carrying your whole life, the sensitivity, the knowing, the depth, the way you receive things that other people do not seem to pick up at all, has a name in the language of science. And that name changes the entire frame of everything I just told you. In laboratories at some of the most rigorous research institutions in the world, scientists have been mapping a specific brainwave frequency for several decades now. They call it gamma, not because the name itself means anything extraordinary, but because of what they discovered when they began tracking what gamma actually does inside the human brain. Gamma is the frequency of heightened intuition, of expanded perception, of the state in which the brain processes information at a depth and a speed that ordinary waking consciousness simply cannot reach. The researchers who spent years studying it described it consistently as the genius state, the state that most people have lost access to. And here is the thing that changed everything. Every human being is born with access to this frequency. Every child in the earliest years of life moves in and out of gamma with a naturalness that the initial research teams found difficult to explain. It is the frequency of wonder, of deep absorption, of the kind of knowing that lives underneath logic, the kind young children have before the world begins teaching them what is and is not appropriate to perceive. But then, gradually, something happens. By the time most children reach the age of 7 or 8, the gamma frequency begins to quiet. Not because anything breaks, because the noise of the world suppresses it. The education systems built around conformity and measurement, the relentless demand to perform, to fit, to manage yourself down into what the environment can handle. The survival rhythms of modern life, which run on a different frequency entirely, the frequency of stress, rather than the frequency of genius. The researchers gave this a name. They called it the decline effect, the slow and systematic suppression of the brain's highest natural operating state. Think of it this way. Imagine the mind as a radio receiver. Most people, by the time they reach adulthood, are locked into a single channel. They hear the static of daily survival. They manage. They function. But the other channels, the ones that carry signal at a completely different depth, have gone quiet in the background, still transmitting, but no longer received. The chosen one is different, and the difference is measurable. The same research that documented the decline effect also documented something else. A specific subset of people, often those with the highest sensitivity, the ones who were always more affected by the world around them than the people standing beside them, these individuals retain access to gamma or regain access to it at a higher rate than the general population. The very things that were interpreted as problems across the years, the intensity, the knowing, the way they absorbed everything around them rather than deflecting it, were the measurable markers of a brain that had not been fully shut down. You were never too sensitive. Your receiver was tuned to a frequency that most of the people around you stopped accessing years ago. I want to tell you about someone. I will not use a name. But she was a woman in her late 30s who had spent the better part of 2 decades explaining herself to the people around her. She was the one who always knew something was off before it was visibly off. The one whose tears arrived without warning in ordinary moments. The one who woke at 3 in the morning and lay in the quiet because sleep would not return. She had been told, across the years, that she was anxious, unstable, too much, not quite right. And she had believed it, at least in part, because no one had ever offered her a different frame for what she was experiencing. When she finally heard the science, when she finally sat with someone who explained in plain language what was actually happening in her brain, something settled. Not in a dramatic, instant way. More, the way a bone settles back into place, quietly. Without fanfare, she stopped apologizing for the depth. She stopped spending her energy managing what she now understood was not a problem. And something in the way she moved through her days became different because she was no longer at war with herself. She is not alone in that story, and neither are you. But here is something I need to be honest with you about, because I think honesty in this specific moment matters more than encouragement. There is something that stops most chosen ones from fully stepping into this. It is not doubt. It is not a lack of information. It is something more personal than either of those. Something that lives right at the edge of the breakthrough and speaks in a very specific voice. What if I am not as ready as I feel right now? And that is not instability. What if this level of change reveals something in me I am not prepared to see? And that is not weakness. What if I actually receive what I have been asking for, and then discover I cannot hold it? And that is not disqualification, because here is the truth about that fear. The ones who have crashed under breakthrough have almost always been the ones who had no fear at all, because they had no real awareness of the weight of what they were receiving. Your hesitation, the one that says, "Are you sure?" The one that asks, "Do you actually understand what this means for your life?" That is not an obstacle. That is the response of someone whose nervous system understands the gravity of what they are being given. That kind of healthy caution is not a sign that you are not ready. It is the sign of someone who will not take lightly what they receive. You are allowed to step into what you were made for. You are allowed to receive what was prepared for you before you knew to ask for it. You are allowed to be seen, fully and without apology. And you are allowed to be afraid, genuinely afraid, and to move forward anyway. The fear and the calling are not opposites. They walk together in the life of a chosen one. Before we come to the end of this message, I want to speak something over your life. Before you leave this closed room today, I am going to declare something over you that I believe you will carry long after you close this. Stay with me for what comes next. But first, I want to make sure you understand what this entire message has actually given you, because what comes next is for the person who received it. There is one thing I need you to understand before I show you the specific tool I am about to describe, and this one thing changes how you receive everything that follows. You came here today carrying 5 signs you had been explaining away as symptoms. You now know they are not symptoms. They are signals. You heard the story of the formation that always happens in private. The Moses who was alone in the wilderness. The Esther who was seen before she saw herself. You understood the neuroscience, the gamma frequency, the decline effect, and why your brain has always been operating at a different resolution than the people around you. You were given permission to step toward what you were made for without apologizing for the fear that arrives alongside it. That is what you have received today, and the person sitting in this closed room right now is not the same person who pressed play at the beginning. Now, Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years of his scientific career studying one specific question. He wanted to understand why certain people retained access to the gamma frequency into adulthood, while the majority lost it early in life. He studied thousands of subjects, worked in partnership with research teams at institutions including MIT and Princeton, and tracked what happened in the brain over time, when the decline effect was allowed to run unchecked, versus when conditions were introduced that could interrupt it. What emerged from those decades of research was both a confirmation of everything the earlier studies had found and a discovery about what the brain responds to when gamma begins to be restored. The brain, he found, does not require complex protocols to return to its original frequency. It requires the right input delivered in the right way. The technical term for this process is entrainment. The auditory system receives a specific pattern of sound, and the brainwave activity of the listener begins to synchronize with that pattern. The brain does not decide to do this. It is simply what the brain was built to do. And when the right frequency is introduced, the gamma state that the decline effect suppressed can begin to come back online. That research became the foundation for something called the Genius Song. The Genius Song is a 7-minute audio track built on that exact entrainment mechanism. You put in your headphones, you close your eyes, you listen. That is the entire practice. No mantras, no journaling, no complex protocol that requires changing your entire life before it works. 7 minutes, once a day. The frequency does the work that decades of the world trying to suppress it undid. You were not born ordinary. The sensitivity, the knowing, the depth, the way you have always operated at a different resolution than the people around you, that was always gamma. That was always the brain in its highest state, trying to hold on to what the world was pushing against. The Genius Song does not add anything to you. It removes the interference that accumulated over years of being told to turn it down. I want to share one more story before I give you the details. A man in his mid-40s who had spent 15 years believing his best thinking was behind him. He was not dramatic about it. He simply accepted, as a quiet background fact, that the clarity he remembered from his younger years, the kind where answers arrived before problems finished forming, was gone. He listened to the Genius Song every morning for 3 weeks. He told me later that what came back was not dramatic. It was the way a light returns when you replace the bulb in a room that has been dim so long you forgot it was supposed to be bright. Remember the radio metaphor, you are the receiver. The Genius Song is the mechanism that turns the dial back to the channel you were born on. 7 minutes, headphones. That is the complete practice. I know some of you are thinking right now, I have tried things before. You have. You have sat with practices and tools and frameworks, and some of them have helped, and some have not. I am not asking you to set that experience aside. I am asking you to consider that what those other things were reaching toward, the opening of the frequency, this is the tool that was built to do exactly that specific thing, not to replace what you are already doing. To support the nervous system that is doing the deeper work you have already been doing for a long time. The Genius Song is available right now for $39. The original price is $49, and you will not find this offer on Amazon or any other marketplace. It is available only through the link in the description and the pinned comment below, and it is delivered immediately to your email as a digital file. No shipping, no waiting. It arrives within minutes. When you receive it, you also receive a complete set of resources at no additional cost. An audio track called Genius Child, valued at $19, calibrated for the developing brain of a child, because the decline effect begins early, and every child deserves access to their original frequency before the world begins suppressing it. The original book that inspired the film, The Secret, valued at $20, because the actual source of those principles, the real financial and philosophical foundation beneath them, is a different experience from knowing the summary. And a 22-minute guided visualization valued at $29 that walks through 4 specific areas of life: financial clarity, relationships, physical health, and the experience of genuine well-being, each of which responds differently when the gamma frequency is restored. Together, these resources are valued at over $80, and they come included at no cost. There is also a 100% money-back guarantee. No conditions, No limit on how many times you listen before deciding whether it is for you. The reason I can tell you that honestly, and not just as a standard guarantee, is this. Of the 18,366 people who have used the Genius song, fewer than 4% have requested a refund. When you put those two numbers together, the scale of use and the rate of retention, the paired data tells you something no promotional language can say on its own. I cannot tell you how long this specific offer will remain available. What I can tell you is that the person in this closed room right now, the one who closed the door, who sat in the quiet, who received everything in this message today, is the exact person this tool was developed for. Before you search for it anywhere else, one thing. The Genius song is only available through the official link, not through any marketplace, not through any third-party source. If you find it listed somewhere other than where I am directing you, it is not the same product. Protect what you are investing in. The link is in the description and the pinned comment below, only if you feel led. Now, before we close, I want to take you somewhere briefly, not with more words, with your own awareness. Place one hand on your chest, wherever you are right now, and just notice what is there. Not what you think should be there. What is actually there in this moment, after everything you have just heard. There is a quality to the silence in the room you closed yourself into at the beginning of this, a specific texture to the stillness. That is not something I created for you in these minutes. It was already there when you arrived. You simply had not stopped long enough to feel it. This is what the Gamma state feels like from the inside. This quietness, this presence, this knowing. You already have access to it. What comes next simply asks you to keep it open. Take one slow breath. Let your hand feel what it feels. And when you are ready, come back into the room. Good. Now let me close this message with something that belongs to you. I want to acknowledge something first. You closed a door today. You created a space that was entirely yours, and you gave your full presence to something that most people around you would not have the capacity to sit still for. That is not a small thing. That is the posture of someone who knows, somewhere deep and beyond argument, that they were built for more than the noise. The posture of someone who is willing to be still while the shifting happens rather than running ahead of it. Now picture the weight that came with you when you pressed play. Not dramatically, just the actual weight of it. The unanswered questions about your place in the larger story. The accumulated years of carrying something without a name for it. The tiredness of being different without anyone in your life quite holding the right frame for what that difference means. Picture it resting on you, wherever you feel it, your shoulders, your chest, the back of your neck. And now, without ceremony, let it fall. Not because every question is answered, not because the path ahead is suddenly clear, but because you no longer need to carry the not knowing in the same way you carried it when you first walked in here. Something has shifted. Let the old weight go, and hear these words. I believe they are being spoken over you right now, from somewhere that this screen is only a channel for. You were chosen before you chose anything, before you understood the sensitivity, before you had a name for the knowing, before you had a single piece of evidence to offer anyone, including yourself. You were already seen. I set you apart, not because of what you would eventually accomplish, but because of who you already were. And the season you are stepping into now is not the beginning of your story. It is the chapter that the whole story was written to lead toward. You are commissioned, you are covered, you are sent. Right now, in rooms around the world that have nothing to do with each other, other chosen ones are in their own closed spaces, sitting in their own quiet, receiving their own piece of this same shift. You are not alone in this. You were never alone in it. And the frequency you carry connects you to something far larger than any single room can hold. And so it is. One more thing before you step back out. What you received in this closed room today is yours. Nobody can argue it away from you. Nobody can talk you out of what just happened in here. It occurred. Hold it carefully in the days that follow this. And know this, The person who pressed play at the beginning and the person about to step back out into the world are not the same person. The shift is real, even if you cannot yet explain it to anyone around you, even if it does not feel dramatic from the inside. It happened. Type the words "I am ready" in the comments below. Not as a performance for anyone watching, as a declaration that lands in your own chest and means something to you. If something in this hour felt true, let your like be your agreement. Let it be your quiet amen to what was spoken in this space today. And if you want to stay connected for what comes next, for the messages being prepared for the season you are entering, stay. What is being prepared for you is worth being here for. For those who felt called to what I shared about the audio track in the description, the link is there and in the pinned comment, only if you feel led. That is all I ask. Before you go, I want you to think of one person, not everyone you know, just one. Someone who has been unusually quiet lately. Someone who carries something they have not been able to explain to anyone around them. The one you have been watching from a distance and wondering if they are okay. You know who came to mind just now. Send this to them, not to convince them of anything, because this message may be looking for them the same way it looked for you today. Your sending could be exactly how it finds them. Go well, chosen one. You were seen here today. You always were. You are not leaving a message. You are leaving a season.